Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see you today. And I want to thank Erica for coming and helping me with my presentation this morning, because she sounds so much more like a 10-year-old than I do. With a morning off school and a cookie from Tim Hortons. So we're going to begin our presentation this morning by telling you a story. And it's a true story. Picture it. It's Pentecost Sunday in the year 2000, and the wide-angle lens of the camera is not wide enough to capture an image of all the children that have gathered at the front of the sanctuary in the suburban United Church. Over 250 children are registered in Sunday school here, and 150 of them would be there on any given Sunday. Now, the wonderful, spirit-filled challenge of ministering to this many children means that each week is electric with the energy and excitement of barely controlled chaos. Staff are hired, volunteers are trained, resource materials are purchased. A great deal of effort and thousands of dollars are invested in this church's ministry with its children. And yet, less than a dozen years later, the number of children gathered at the front of this sanctuary in this very same congregation is much, much smaller. Now there are about 70 children registered in Sunday school, and a typical Sunday would see about 24 of them present. Those with the passion for children's ministry look around in confusion and ask themselves, what went wrong? The story of this congregation's ministry with its children may be startling, but it is not unique. It is indicative of the reality facing many United Churches today. As with other mainstream Christian denominations across Canada, the United Church today is struggling with a new reality. Exterior factors, including sociological, economic, and political pressures, have seriously eroded the Church's traditional prominence in Canadian society. That the United Church is navigating through a new wilderness is obvious in its shrinking demographic of children. The total number of children involved on a regular basis in United Church congregations across Canada today is less than 1/3 of what it was in the late 1980s, when a new approach to children's ministry became a national focus. But in today's reality of smaller congregations and fewer children, have the efforts of the past borne fruit in unexpected ways? What are children actively involved in congregations today saying about their experience of church? What aspects of the ministry offered to them has supported their faith formation, and what has not? How has the United Church encouraged the faith formation of its children? These are the questions I set out to investigate in this project. Now, whetting my appetite in this exploration was an appreciation of key principles evident in the biblical narrative. Within the overarching story of our faith, there are clear expectations of religious education, spiritual development, hospitality, and inclusion. The Deuteronomist calls Israel to recite the Shema, the Jewish daily prayer, to its children. The psalmist sings to God in times of celebration and in times of despair. Jesus welcomes to him the children and affirms their place in the kingdom of God. Paul calls all the baptized one in Christ. In the reality of a new wilderness, has the United Church been faithful to the biblical narrative's expectation? Have the concepts of religious education, spiritual development, hospitality, and inclusion remained a priority so that children today feel welcomed and supported, their faith nurtured and deepened? Have child theologies emerged that affirm both a commitment to children and a desire to reinterpret Christian theology and practice as a whole in light of attention paid to children? Do United Church children sense God's presence in their lives? I hoped the children themselves would tell me. I interviewed 8 children, ranging from ages 9 to 11 years. And so I introduce to you from the top, a little faded they are, but Isabella, Lindsay Ann, Leanna, Rachel, Kara, James, all you can see of James is his hair, and Sam. 7 here, but I interviewed 8 because Bo didn't have time to draw me a picture. Bo was too busy breaking my crayons rather than drawing. So we don't have Bo on this one. These names are not the names of the children themselves. They are names they chose for themselves, and they are the names that I will use throughout this presentation. This is a small sampling of interviewees, but it is a reasonable number within the expectations of a qualitative study. Qualitative study allows for a narrow but deep investigation through conversation and storytelling, rather than a broad and shallow investigation through statistical measurement and analysis. Each of these children is active in one of 3 different United Church congregations, one urban, one suburban, and one rural. Each congregation itself has an average Sunday attendance of between 50 and 100 worshipers, and each is ministered to by one ordained female clergy person. Most of the interviews were conducted in the children's home congregations, in their churches, and all took place in the presence of an adult silent observer. Now, this study is not intended as a Sunday school review. Although for most children, a substantial portion of their time at church is spent in Sunday school, I was more interested in a holistic approach, inquiring about the children's overall experience of church in both the worship space and the Sunday school area. My thinking is influenced by the late Jean Boltus, former program consultant with the Ministry of Children Unit for the United Church, who wrote in 2002, "If children are to grow in faith and hope, it is as important for them to interact with the total faith community, to be nourished regularly in communal worship, pastoral care, community outreach, stewardship, and social justice activities, as it is to participate in their own Sunday school." And so our interviews began. John, are you able to move forward? The first question I asked the children was, what do you feel when you come into your church? And they responded,
Peace. I feel happy. Safe. It's like I've been here before. It's okay.
All the children expressed a sense of comfort when they entered their churches. Deeper conversation made it clear that this comfort was based on a familiarity of 3 things: familiarity of space, familiarity of faces, and familiarity of ritual. When the children crossed the threshold into their churches, they knew where they were going, who would be there, and what would happen. None expressed feelings of resistance or nervousness. Rather, their comments spoke of both security and anticipation.
I get to see my friends from church, and I'm going to learn something new. decided what we're going to do. I know that God is there and we're going to talk about God.
Rachel made a point of saying that coming to church made her feel a little different.
I feel like God is closer to me than usual. When I'm out of the church, I don't feel as close to him. When I come into the church, I feel a little different. I don't know why.
Although Rachel's church was a familiar place, for her it was not an ordinary place. Her church provided holy ground where she could sense God's presence. Several of the children took me on a tour of the sanctuary of their churches. They were comfortable with the space, and none of them demonstrated hesitation. There was no indication that they felt they were standing where they shouldn't stand or touching what they shouldn't touch. Clearly, they did not see their churches as museums of relics or ritual objects. Rather, as Leanna said,
I like this church. It just feels special. It feels like another home.
the children were confident about the function of various areas and pieces of furniture in the sanctuary, even if they didn't use traditional language to name them. So, the narthex is...
the lobby.
The bulletin is...
the little booklet.
The pulpit is where...
the minister reads things out.
The pews are...
the benches.
The chancel is...
the stage where the choir is.
And the font is...
the baptize thing.
All the children could name their minister by her first name, and only Kara referred to her minister as Reverend. Some of the children could remember a few of their congregation's previous ministers and told stories about most of them. This familiarity with clergy, both present and past, gave the impression of friendship and ease, an impression that was strengthened by the children's total confidence that their ministers knew them and could call them by name. The children also appeared certain that other adults in their congregations knew who they were.
I've been here since I've been like 4 months old, so everyone knows who I am. Not each and every one of them, but probably most of them know what my name is. Yeah, other people know me who come to church.
Only sometimes did those adults speak directly to the children. The children gave no indication, however, that they felt slighted or ignored by this lack of communication. For their part, the children demonstrated difficulty in naming any adult other than their ministers, their regular Sunday school teachers, and a few others with whom they had regular contact. A simple recognition of faces was enough for the children to decide they knew the adults in their congregations.
I don't know everyone in the church, but I know most people. I recognize them. I don't know all their names. They do look familiar.
Except for special occasions, the format of the worship services in all 3 congregations is the same. The children are present in the sanctuary for the first 15 to 20 minutes of the service before moving to their Sunday school area. As Lindsay Ann described,
we stand up and sing songs, and when we come up for children's time, I come over here and sit. I listen to the story, and when we pray, and then we go downstairs to Sunday school.
Routine appeared to be important for the children, extending from the comfort of sitting in the same place every Sunday.
I usually sit at the very front. I don't know why, just for some reason. The 6th row on the right on the wall. I just like sitting there.
To the predictability and enjoyment of congregational singing.
I like when we sang at the beginning.
The children had an obvious familiarity with the opening rituals of their church's worship services. Most routinely participated in specific aspects of those opening rituals by presenting the symbols of worship, the Bible, the candle, or the cross, or by reading. Although none participated directly in a children's choir, Kara assisted with the younger children's choir, and Lindsay Ann and Leanna provided occasional music ministry by singing with an intergenerational worship band. Familiarity of ritual continued when the children moved to their Sunday school area. Even though each of the 3 congregations relied on a different, commercially prepared Sunday school curriculum, all the children identified common elements in their Sunday school experience.
Usually we read the story, and then we'll do an activity. We do a lot of activities, God-related activities. Mostly we'll do crafts the whole time and learn a bit.
Most of the children spoke of story, and most spoke of coloring sheets or crafts. Some spoke of music and prayer, and a few specifically talked about being with friends. All implied that Sunday school was a comfortable space.
It's fun. Safe, protective, joyful, pretty much just like the church.
While most children look forward to moving to their Sunday school area, James preferred to remain in the sanctuary.
Because I like singing.
Bo sometimes took advantage of the freedom to choose, saying,
I'm in Sunday school a lot and just wanted to take a short break for once.
The second question the children considered was, how would you describe God? All of the children used positive imagery to articulate their concept of God. God was a good guy. And make no mistake, God was a God. All of the children used the masculine pronoun in relation to God. For them, God was definitely a human-like he. Some of the children immediately jumped to a detailed physical description.
An angel-like man with a robe, maybe a harp. Really, really tall, with a short brown-black hair and a little short beard and a mustache. He's wearing one of those Greek good big white sheep things.
Others first went to a functional description.
God wouldn't hurt you. He doesn't do bad things. The man who created us and watches us. Protective.
Most consistent among all the comments was the children's conviction that God's primary role was that of helper.
He would probably help you. He tries to help people. Solves their problems with a prayer. I never see him, but he usually helps people.
The children's anthropomorphic descriptions of God are consistent with Ronald Goldman's findings in the 1960s, that visualizing God in human and physical terms, sometimes with special human features like gentleness or kindness, continues until about the age of 11. Also consistent with Goldman's findings is Leanna's statement that God and Jesus are synonymous.
I think he resembles Jesus. They're the same person for some reason. I think they resemble the same and have almost the same personalities.
Most of the children said they felt connected to God when they were in church, and almost as many said they felt close to God in other places as well. A couple specifically felt a connection to God through church music, sometimes while participating in congregational singing, and sometimes while listening to the choirs and choirs. Some felt connected to God when they were helping others or were being helped. A couple said they felt close to God when they thought about people from their families or communities who had died, or when they attended Remembrance Day services. A few of the children spoke, albeit hesitantly, about connecting with God through personal prayer. They preferred to speak of prayer as something led by adults, as part of the corporate worship experience. This unease with prayer highlights what children's spirituality consultant Rebecca Nye says in her critique of contemporary ministry with children. A ministry which, she says, tends to approach spiritual life as something that begins only after children have been filled up with religious knowledge. She argues that children have an innate spirituality that can be nurtured by integrating spiritual practices into children's ministries. And it is through regular attention to silence and prayer that children can relate to the mystery and immanence of God. Almost all of the children gave to any adult who had a teaching or leadership role in their church credit for helping them feel connected to God. These adults included Sunday school teachers, parents, family friends within the church, summer day camp leaders, church choir members. However, the children specifically assigned their ministers particular aspects of connection.
She helps me remember that Jesus and God are important. She tells example of what God does and sometimes reminds me of myself. She helps us pray.
None of the children acknowledged learning about God from their peers, and only Leanna acknowledged influence from an adult beyond the church setting. Kara said that she would like to see the sharing and helping that she saw happening within her church become common practice in society. Her church then demonstrated for her the ethos of a compassionate and caring community, an ethos that she did not see in other places. For Kara, God was primarily a helper, so her church helped her feel connected to God, by itself being a helping community. When asked what one thing in their church the children would like to change, most said,
"Nothing. I don't really think you should change anything."
The children appeared content with how things were. They were content with the familiar, and most were reluctant to think beyond what was for them the norm. A couple of children, however, did open their imaginations. Lindsay Ann said,
"I'd put some more kids in our Sunday school, because we don't really have a lot of new kids in our Sunday school. And make more communions. I like communions."
And when I asked her why she liked communion, she said,
"We have one loaf of bread through the whole church, and I like the fact that Jesus kind of broke up his body and gave it to like 12, 19, 20 people."
In her own way, Lindsay Ann was expressing a theology of sacrament and a theology of community. Being invited to the communion table as part of the whole people of God clearly had had a profound effect on her, and it was an act that she wanted to experience with more regularity. When asked what she would like to change in her church, Leanna said,
"A bit more singing. I know that we sing a lot, but I love singing. And I wish that during Sunday school we could listen to music while we're doing stuff."
She went on to say that a previous Sunday school teacher played recorded music while she did coloring sheets or other seat work, and she sang along with
songs about Noah's Ark and stuff like that.
Leanna said she remembered the biblical stories better because of the songs. This draws attention to Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which identifies the different ways in which children and adults learn, and how the integration of that learning into one's overall development takes place. Of the 8 intelligences Gardner identified, Leanna's comments imply that she gravitates toward the musical, rhythmic intelligence. She learns comfortably and well through music. When asked, what would you want to stay the same? The children's responses reiterated their comfort with the familiarity of space, the familiarity of faces, and the familiarity of ritual. Leanna particularly appreciated and wanted to maintain her church's efforts to be inclusive of all age groups.
Young kids, babies, teens, preteens, young adults, adults, and elders. Yeah, they include everyone. But my grandmother's 4-hour church with no Sunday school, I'm ready to fall asleep. I would say to her, "I'm sorry, but I cannot go to church today because, well, I love your church, but yours is 4 hours long and it's for adults."
I began my investigation asking how the United Church encourages the faith formation of its children. United Church continue to honor the biblical narrative's expectation of religious education, spiritual development, hospitality, and inclusion, so that children felt welcomed and supported, their faith nurtured and deepened. Based on my conversations with these 8 children, it appears that their congregations are attempting to do just that. The children spoke of a hospitable environment that welcomed both their presence and their participation. However, I suggest to you that although the children expressed comfort with church as it was, with a few minor tweaks, it is possible that the children's experience in church could be further enriched and their relationship with God further enhanced. For example, the children spoke predominantly of coloring sheets and crafts in their Sunday school. Leaders acquainted with Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences could explore other types of activities that would touch on different learning styles. The children spoke of activities, but they were reluctant to speak of prayer. Leaders acquainted with the work of Rebecca Nye, Jerome Berryman, and others could begin to integrate spiritual practices such as silence and prayer into their programs, enhancing the children's natural, inborn spirituality. The children spoke of parental influence in helping them connect with God. Leaders acquainted with the work of Marcia Bunge, Bonnie Miller-McLemore, and others could develop strategies to encourage faith development of the whole family so that the religious education in the church does not happen in isolation from the home. The children spoke of participating regularly in the opening intergenerational moments of their worship services. Leaders acquainted with the work of Brian McLaren and others from the emerging church movement could experiment with broader approaches to intentional intergenerational communities of faith. By listening to our children speak of their experiences of church, maybe we in the United Church can hear in their voices echoes of our own adult stories. And then maybe we can remember that while we minister to our children, they minister to us. And maybe they can help us navigate through this wilderness of our 21st century reality, so that we not only come to know about God, but we come to know God. Thank you.
I hate to take the microphone from Rebecca, right? Or sorry, Erica. I wish I could keep you away all day. But let me ask you questions too. Are you ready for that? And this is where I call that poking the eye. Oh, here. Excellent. Wow. Questions? One, two.
I've been a Sunday school leader for a really long time and a youth leader, and I love the craft time. That's my favorite part. However, I brought in all kinds of craft supplies, and then only to find out a week later I have everyone's parents yelling at me. My daughter wore her nicest dress and got it covered in paint. My son had clay all stuck in the collar of his shirt. Would you like to do all kinds of other crafts besides just crayons? Is that a good thing to be able to paint and everything else? And what would you suggest we do about keeping it clean? We're going to wear our Sunday costume.
See, I know you get the first question.
I would suggest that all the children bring some kind of paint shirt to wear or something to cover their nice clothes that they wear to Sunday school so that they could still have fun and do crafts and not get their Sunday school clothes and nice dresses and stuff dirty.
Our home congregation actually has a big bin of shirts that we picked up at Frenchie's. And so the kids put on these monstrous big shirts and it just covers everything. They're good to go.
Janice, you began by talking about the decline in overall numbers in enrollments in church school and in worship and the demographic shift. Do you have any thoughts about what happened between the then and the now? You have your opening story. That's just the one connection I was listening to.
Mm-hmm. So many. There's no one area that we can pinpoint. We know that families get involved in other activities. If there are two career families, that means somebody's working on Sunday morning. That plays an impact on it. The children are busy with other things. If there are two different households, the children are sometimes with one parent and not the other. There are so many economic and social issues that play a part in why I think the numbers in that story I told you, why they diminished. Too many to pinpoint.
Have you discerned a qualitative difference between the children's ministry we did when all we had to do was open the doors and buy the curriculum, and the children's ministry we do now? Are you suggesting perhaps that we did a better job with fewer children than we did when we had many?
Well, that was the question I was hoping to answer myself. And I was frankly surprised with the responses of the children, that they were so comfortable and they felt that things were great and we shouldn't change anything. But then, as one of my classmates pointed out, isn't that so indicative of how we adults get? Everything's good, don't mess with what's not broken. But I think as leaders within the church, it is incumbent upon us to bring in these other pieces so that we can maybe broaden the horizons.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was great. I'm kind of curious about this 11-year-old idea of who God is and what role God plays in life. And I'm also very curious about the wilderness that you describe. And I'm wondering if the parents of those children that were there in the year 2000 had the sort of education, but not the knowledge of who God was. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a bit about what might happen with these young people today who are at home in the churches. Probably most of the people here were. What's happening in these years to come to make that faith be real for them?
I wonder, when I look back at the congregation in the year 2000 that had all those children, if maybe if there wasn't so much effort focused on the children, maybe we missed the parents. Because chances are the parents are of that generation, they didn't have a big connection with church either. I think rather than focusing just on the children in the year 2000, if we had spread our resources a little more and really tried to involve parents in their own faith development, that perhaps there wouldn't have been such a dramatic drop in that congregation. Which is why I think the information or the material, the research that Marcia Bunge and Bonnie Miller-McLemore is so important, because they're really encouraging congregations to certainly build up the faith of children, but not to forget that the family has a huge role. The family is the place where children really learn who they are, and if there's a real sense of spirituality and wholeness, holistic understanding within the family, then that's going to support what the church offers, rather than the other way
fascinating presentation. In terms of the questions about education that have come up, I was reminded of a story that I heard just a couple of days ago about someone who was taking their child to go start to get a violin. And what they didn't know was that they had signed up for the Suzuki method. So when they arrived, they had their kid, the child's small violin, and the teacher looked and said, okay, so where's your violin? And the mom looked at him and went, what? This is a method where the child and the parent learn the thing together at the same time. Right? Have you, in terms of looking through the educational resources that you've clearly been consulting, are there models of education that would foster the kind of integration you're talking about at a really direct level?
You know, I can't answer that. The Sunday school curriculum, the curricula there, what's the word I'm looking for, are suggested or are suggested, I guess is the best word. Clearly, they follow, to a large degree, the usual model of, classroom time, although that classroom time has evolved. It looks different than it did, certainly when I was a child. But still, there are, I'm not aware of any that really pair children and adults as closely as I think you're implying, Dave. Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
I would hope they are out there. I just haven't found them yet.
Nobody could have thought.
Janice, I have to wonder if it's not so much that we have to change curriculum, but perhaps we have to look at how we do church. I mean, if people are getting to church because of families that are split, or there's soccer practice on Sunday, or whatever, and our lives have changed, maybe we need to rethink this idea of this Sunday church and look at a new way to do church altogether.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If there is, in my happy space, there is a Thursday night 45-minute worship that is completely intergenerational, and it happens every week. And it's Thursday night because it's not quite the end of the week, but close enough that parents are perhaps not exhausted. And by having all the children and all the adults together in a completely intergenerational service, that to me would be heaven. But I haven't been able to find a place where that actually happens yet. It's still in my happy space in my head.
Thank you, Janice. One of the things that I have been noticing over the last year is that there are more and more grandparents bringing their children. The parents aren't coming, but the grandparents are bringing their children. And you spoke about the influence of parents and other adults, but what about grandparents and what might be out there for us to support that type of ministry, grandparents and grandkids, especially for us as the 3 to 5 year olds. I know that you're talking about 9 to 11, but I think it relates.
Well, family kind of grows, doesn't it? I mean, our traditional idea of family is not necessarily who we see on Sunday morning. There are resources through the United Church, I know, that support grandparents who have taken on that role of being the spiritual mentor for children. And I can't give you a name of it right now, Steve, but I know they're there and I can find them for you. But yeah, I think what you're mentioning is a reality in many cases, or enough that we notice now. Because the parents are doing other things, the grandparents understand the significance of having children involved in the spiritual community, a faith community, and they've taken on that role. Any congregation that I think recognizes that and supports the grandparents in that role is really doing everyone an excellent service, a real ministry.
Wonderful job, Janice. Just wondering, the anthropomorphic
Yeah, how often did I have to practice that?
concept of God and the patriarchal concept of God that children have. Do you think that there's any interest, need, requirement to make some adjustments in the understanding of God for children because of what their beliefs in God are based on at present?
Yes, however, I worry about children who stick with a very male image of God. That worries me because, as Goldman says in his research in the early 60s, although most children stick with a male image up until about age 11, sometimes it begins to shift, sometimes it never does. And so we get to a point in our congregations where we almost are inundated all the time with male imagery for God. And we know in our hearts that God is bigger, but we struggle for language that fits a bigger God than that. And I think we're kind of tied to our scriptural, our biblical narrative, because so many of our scripture passages are male-dominated when it comes to God. So we're kind of, I wouldn't say beating our head against the wall, but really it is a challenge to expand that language when it is so predominant in everything we have. I try not to use gender-specific words for God. It gets really cumbersome sometimes. But it's what I think I can do to at least, soften things a bit, to maybe open open to the possibility, have people recognize that perhaps there's another way to think about God.
We're just about at time. I have a question, and then I can pose to both of you, if that's okay. There's a fair bit of debate in youth ministry and children's ministry circles that Sunday school should be, or the Christian education program should be, held about the same time as church, and there's very little, and so basically worship on Sundays for adults, and the Sunday program for children is for children, and never the twain meet, or maybe just periodically at the very end of the liturgy, if at all. But I heard at the very outset the importance of names, faces, the children feeling recognized by the adults. Do either of you have a comment? I guess the bottom line is, how critical is it for children to be a part of the worship community in their faith development?
How important is it for you to go to church, to be part of the church?
I like going to Sunday school, but I also like staying down and listening to the stories that God tells and staying with the adults and being able to experience being in church and really being open to telling people what I think of God and what God really means to me.
Excellent.
Just a quick one. I think part of the reason why that intergenerational happy place I have on Thursday nights hasn't happened because it takes so much energy and so much work, and we just haven't gotten to a point there where I think we can do that on a regular basis. But it's still a dream.
Excellent. To Janice and to Erica, well done. Thank you so much.